We're poised on a precipice. A few steps forward, we fall over, sleepwalking to incredible disaster. Kind of the image that comes to mind is somebody falling off a skyscraper. And as he passes the 50th floor, some hands reach out saying, "I'll pull you in." He says, "Don't bother. It's fun. I'm doing fine." No, that's us. Don't bother to look down to see what's right in front of you. Now, what's in front of us? Enormous changes are anticipated. Let's take the Middle East, an area we're all concerned about. A recent report showed that temperatures in the Middle East are rising twice as high as elsewhere in the world, expected to increase by 5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. That's close to the level of unlivability. And of course, it doesn't stop there. Israeli climate scientists have been warning for years of the danger, urging the government to do something. Never responds. They just came out with a new study, much more alarmist than before, shows that the sea level off the coast of Israel, that means in the Eastern Mediterranean, is expected to rise a full meter by 2050 and 2.5 meters by the end of the century. Just think about that, 2.5 meters of sea level rise. It's no more country. That's what's anticipated. Similar things elsewhere in the world, not that severe, but bad enough. Take South Asia, billions of people. It's almost at the level of unlivability. Poor Pakistan, as you know, is being subjected to an incredible rainfall. Half the country's underwater, can barely survive. Meanwhile, right next door in India, have a huge drought, kind of like the United States in that respect, but much more severe. People in poor areas of Rajasthan are living at almost 50 degrees centigrade Celsius, barely survivable. They don't have air conditioning. Almost nobody does, living in mud huts, temperatures that are indescribable. Of course, it's getting worse. India and Pakistan are nuclear armed states. There are diminishing sources of water as the glaciers melt in the Himalayas. Pretty soon they're going to be struggling over who gets the limited source of waters. Major nuclear states. Nuclear war between powerful states is almost terminal. Effective nuclear winter might just about destroy everything. Well, that's South Asia. The same thing's going on in much of the world. I should say, going back to the Middle East and the skyscraper image, while they're careening to disaster, Israel and Lebanon are struggling over who can produce more fossil fuels on their border. And of course, the whole region is the main fossil fuel producer in the world. The hands are reaching out, but nobody's grasping them. Let's race to cataclysm. Well, you can expect extraordinary refugee flow, unimaginable, irreversible tipping points coming. Still a narrow window in which to do something about it. We know what can be done in considerable detail. It's feasible, but you have to do it.
Do you think there's any danger of nuclear war in the meantime, stumbling into that? We insist on being adversaries rather than working together with China and Russia and other states.
We will either work together with Russia and China on the problems we face, none of which have borders, heating the climate, nuclear war, pandemics. We either work together with them or we all fall together. It's as simple as that. And what we're doing is racing to make it worse on each front. Each front. Take Ukraine, which is in the headlines. There is talk about possible Russian use of tactical nuclear weapons, which is a more serious, immediate threat. Russia, as US and British and including Ukrainian military analysts are pointing out, Putin, much to their surprise, has not fought a US-British style war. US and British war, you go for the jugular. You destroy communications, transportation, energy, immediately, anything that might make the society function. Whatever the reason is, nobody understands. Russia hasn't done that. Kiev functions, not perfectly, but pretty well. The rest of Western Ukraine too hasn't hit supply lines. He has the conventional weapons to do that. Everyone knows that. All sides agree. Why not? But nobody knows, but he might. And it might, in the background, lead to further escalation, tactical nuclear weapons. Escalation ladder from there is very easy. That's a possibility. Is there a possible solution? Yeah, negotiations and diplomacy. Is that possible? Well, you might have heard Emmanuel Macron, one of the rare statesmen in the world, a couple of days ago on CNN, repeating that something like the Minsk agreements, if implemented, could have prevented the war up to the last minute, but nobody was pursuing them. What about now? Nobody ever talks about this. There's very little reporting. We only talk about war. But things do go on. So last April, there were negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, which apparently were making some progress, not sponsored by the US, sponsored by Turkey. What happened? Well, the Prime Minister of England, Boris Johnson, flew to Ukraine, told him the West, meaning the US and Britain, didn't want a settlement now, wanted to continue the war. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin followed him. We don't have the record, but he presumably repeated official US policy, which is that the war must continue to severely weaken Russia. So negotiations are off the table. Is it possible to continue? We don't know. Let's turn to China. It doesn't get reported, but what's happening in China with regard to China is utterly shocking, almost unbelievable. First of all, let's remember what the circumstances are. There's a settlement about Taiwan. It's held for 50 years. It's called the One China policy. The US agrees, as the entire world does, that Taiwan is part of China. But there's an agreement with China on what's called strategic ambiguity. Neither side does anything provocative. Well, that's kept the peace for 50 years. The United States is now actively moving to undermine it. One minor step was Nancy Pelosi's reckless and stupid visit, which did shake things up, but that settled down. September 14th, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed a bill called the Taiwan Policy Act, which is designed to race towards nuclear war. Is that hyperbole? Take a look at it. It says we will regard Taiwan as a non-NATO ally, but otherwise treated as an ally. That means large, huge weapons sales to Taiwan, military maneuvers, with Taiwan, on Taiwan, joint military maneuvers, interoperability of weapons, and diplomatic recognition comparable to other allies. This is in radical violation of international law, which regards Taiwan as part of China, as we have, and it's a serious provocation. It's bipartisan. This is if these guys want to race to destruction. Can't figure out what's in their minds. Is there anything we can do about it? Very definitely. There should be massive popular movements calling on the United States to join with the world on this. And I mean the world. Take Ukraine. The South, the majority of the word, is pleading for negotiations. Same in Europe. Germany, most important country, over 3/4 of the population want to move to negotiations right away. US and Britain say no, can't do that. France keeps trying. Is it possible? We don't know. The only way to find out is to try. If we refuse to try, of course not. We're really facing going to a precipice. It's very close, and there's plenty that can be done about it on all fronts. We should be doing what we know from experience works, and there isn't anything else. We should be working very hard, diligently, to spread understanding of what we're doing, of how we're falling from the skyscraper and ignoring the hands that are reaching out to try to save us, that we can, which we can do, and we should be organizing mass popular movements to do it. It's been done in the past, can be done, it was done, takes effort, it's risky, but you can do it. It was done in Vietnam after many years, had an impact. The women's movement had a huge impact. The anti-nuclear movement in the 80s was enormous, biggest popular movement in American history, enormous demonstrations, induced Reagan to accept the proposal, Gorbachev's proposal for an INF treaty in 1987, which intermediate range missiles, which significantly increased the prospects for peace. And that was torn apart by Donald Trump as part of the Republican commitment to destroy the whole arms control regime. Started with the second Bush, destroyed the ABM treaty, very serious threat to Russia, I should say. Trump came along, tried to destroy everything he could, didn't quite manage, didn't have quite enough time to get rid of the New START treaty. He missed by a couple of days. So Biden was barely able to save it before expiration. But these guys are coming back.